Welcome. This is episode 1 of the newest show on the TWiP Network, TWiP Weddings. My name is Bruce Clarke, and I'm going to be one of your hosts for this new show that's dedicated to wedding photography. And joining me in the co-host chair today are Mr. Robert Evans and Mr. Bryan Caporicci. Welcome, guys.
How you doing?
Good.
Hello, hello.
I'm excited. Excited to be here with you guys. I think we've assembled a crack team. I'm big fans of both of you guys, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot from both of you guys and from our audience and getting into the show. So it's pretty exciting. So we want this show, we want this to be a valuable resource for wedding photographers, regardless of how long you've been shooting. Whether you're just getting started out or whether you've been in business for several years. Our goal with this show is going to have informative and educational discussions about all things related to running a successful wedding studio, and also portraits. We'll get into portraits as well. But each episode we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. We're going to look at sales, we're going to look at marketing, we're going to talk about technique, we're going to talk about gear, creativity, workflow, post-production, business challenges, organization, inspiration, and a whole bunch of other topics. But those are some of the things that we're going to cover on this show. And from time to time, we're also going to bring in special guests to get their perspective on a wide range of topics related to the industry. Now, we're also going to want to hear from you, our audience, and we're going to have a few different ways that you can get in touch with us. One of the ways is through the website. So you're going to be able to go over to thisweekinphoto.com and leave your comments on the blog post for this episode or future episodes. You'll also be able to send us questions. We've set up a special email address for this show. You can get a hold of us at TWiPWed, so that's TWiP, W-E-D, at thisweekinphoto.com. Or you can send a tweet using the hashtag TWiPWed. And we'll watch for those, and we're going to have segments on the show where we're going to answer listener questions and get your feedback on the show. And we're going to take all that and use that to help frame what we do with this show, what topics we're going to talk about, what our discussions are going to be about. So this is exciting times, guys. I'm really glad that both of you are here. Like I say, I'm big fans of both of your guys' work, and I think we cover a really wide range of experience on this show, and we've got different talents that we're bringing on board here. So this is pretty exciting times. So I think, like a lot of our clients, I know that this last year a good third or a good quarter of our clients met for the first time sort of online. We're kind of doing the same thing here a little bit, so it's kind of like Plenty of Fish, but not really. Except at the end of the episode, we won't have to worry about that awkward moment, right? Whether we have a kiss or whether we just handshake. So
I always kiss on the first date, so I'm fine with that.
Oh dear. Yeah. So let's meet our panel of experts. Let's find out who everybody is on this show, and for those who maybe aren't familiar with Bryan, Robert, and myself, that's what this episode's going to be about. We want to introduce ourselves to you guys, so you know who you're talking to, and sort of talk about what this show is going to be about and what the structure is going to look like going forward. So let's start with Robert. Robert Evans. If I got in an elevator with you and we had a couple of minutes, give me the quick overview of who is Robert Evans.
All right. Well, first I would say I'm excited to be here and to be part of this. Education has always been important to me as far as giving back. I'm going into my 26th year as a professional wedding photographer. I shot my very first wedding in January of 1989. So I shot film and then transitioned into digital probably around 2002. I think is when I made the jump. But I definitely want to, like you said, we want to frame this show around the listeners and what they want to learn and educate. So definitely, write your questions, comments, send us email. And hopefully, I think one of my goals is to help you not make the mistakes that I did. Mistakes are good because we learn from them, but actually just to help you grow quicker and forward. And I really want to bring up, I think for me it's important, the quality of wedding photography, not just image-wise, but status-wise. I think sometimes wedding photographers get the low man on the totem pole position, and I think wedding photographers make the best overall photographers because you have to be quick and fast and know what you're doing. And I think a wedding photographer could shoot more things than, let's just say someone that was a landscape architect. I'm not putting them down. I just think, I can shoot a variety of things because of what I've learned over the years. So anyway, I'm excited about that. What else do you want to know about me? I really got into photography when I was 12, 13. My dad was into it. And to sum it up, basically, I decided when I was in high school, really, that I kind of got into it, fell in love with it. It was a teacher that really kind of got me involved in it, took it all the way through junior high and high school, got away from it for a little bit, and then got back into it. And at 19, 18 years old, growing up in Los Angeles, my attitude was like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I wanted to do photography, but the thought was like, well, how am I going to be a photographer? Like everyone's a photographer in this town, like everyone's an actor. And that was, in 88, 87. And I think the most important lesson there that I've learned looking back on that is, just basically the putting the one foot in front of the other, doing what you really want to do, finding your passion, believing in yourself, and just keep going and not, listening to what others tell you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. Now, I think it's probably, I would not want to be a photographer starting out in the business today, but it doesn't mean that should stop you. You can rise to the top and be the best at your game if that's what you want and you're really passionate about. What else do you want from me, Bruce?
Well, I think we can certainly bounce off that. There's some things I wanted to ask you about. Why wouldn't you want to start up today? But I think maybe before that, let's get Bryan in on this. And I want to learn a little bit more. Just again, give us the elevator pitch, Bryan, a little bit about who is Bryan Caporicci.
Cool. I'm the token Canadian here on the show. So
no.
No. Oh no, never mind. No, I'm not. So Robert's the only one from the U.S. then. Okay. So I'm up in Niagara, Ontario, not too far from Niagara Falls. I've been a wedding photographer. I'm going into my 9th year now, so not quite as long as Robert, but over the last 9 years, as much as Robert's seen a lot of changes in 26 years, there's also been a lot of changes in the 9 years that I've been in. And so I've mostly been a wedding photographer for my entire career. I actually got into photography, and I'm sure listeners will appreciate it and sort of get to know this as we get into it. I have a huge passion for the business side of photography, and I actually got into it because I had the entrepreneurial sort of kick into it, as opposed to getting into it because of photography. I actually started my business as a sports photographer, and I didn't even own a camera. I didn't even know what an f-stop was when I first started it. So I actually started it for the business reason and then fell in love with photography from there. So it's sort of an interesting journey for me because I fell in love with photography as I got into it, but my path is different than what most photographers would typically follow. Most photographers get into it because they love the creative side of photography. They love, how they can, communicate a vision or capture a story or tell a moment through photography. And then they get into it, specifically wedding photography in the context of this show, and they quickly realize there's all this business stuff they have to do. And so my passion is business. And as much as I love photography and I love shooting, and I've, been fortunate to get all kinds of recognition for that, my passion in teaching is on the business side of it. And that's really what fuels me, because there's too many photographers that I have met, seen, and been in communication with that end up failing in this industry, but it's not because they're not great photographers. It's because they don't have those solid business foundations. And so I'm really, really passionate about teaching those actionable, how-to, really down-to-earth, concrete business ideas, no fluff stuff, just to get photographers on board and get them moving and growing and creating a sustainable photography business. And so that's sort of where my passion is today in terms of teaching. But yeah, I'm still a full-time working photographer, weddings and portraits. I spend about 65% of my working hours on wedding photography, and the rest of it on portrait work, combination between family portraits, boudoir portraits, and business portraits. And so that's sort of me in a nutshell. I didn't go to school for photography. I'm completely self-taught in photography. I have a computer science background, and I also went to school for business. So I more have that tech nerd kind of like nitty-gritty mechanical background on things. So I'm sure the listener will learn that as we go through that. I'll often be coming in and talking about those nitty gritty kind of techie nerdy things, and hopefully, if I go too fast, sometimes you guys will slow me down on that, because I make a lot of assumptions when I talk about things like that. But listen, I'm super jazzed about this. I love podcasting. I have my own podcast as well about the business of photography. I consume podcasts like it's going out of style. Like if you looked at my iPhone and all the podcasts I subscribe to, like I probably got 50 in there. And I just think it's a great form of education because it's valuable, it's long form, so you can get really into some meat and potatoes in a podcast show format. But it's also in a way slightly passive in the way that you can be doing other things while you're listening to a podcast. So the listener right now that's listening to us, I mean, there's a chance that you're sitting there behind your computer listening while you're editing, but you could also be out for a run. You could be driving. You could be at the gym. Whatever it is you're doing, I just love that you can be taking in this kind of education and doing something else. So it's like a passive educational stream, and so I really love that. I consume podcasts like crazy, and so I'm excited to be involved in this one as well with you guys.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah.
What about you, Bruce? Tell us about you.
Oh, about me. Well, I'm probably, I guess I'm the rookie, or I'm the newbie out of the group here. I've been shooting for just a little less than Bryan. I've probably been in business for about 8 years. But I've been shooting before that for quite a while. I kind of fell into photography accidentally. I have a background in education and a background in business. I was working in the IT space for a number of years. I taught in Japan. I've had a bunch of different careers in my life, but photography wasn't ever anything that was on the, in the plan. It was always something that I just enjoyed doing. Initially, it was mostly just travel photography. I did a lot of traveling when I was younger, and shooting film and just did a lot of a lot of travel photography. I never really thought it would be something that I'd get into, other than just a hobby. And then as I started doing it more, I realized how much I enjoyed doing it. And I started, of course, people see your work and you start getting asked to shoot different things and different events. And I actually got started photographing events and covered a lot of different events and had kind of a bit of a big break. I ended up shooting a big event for David Foster, for the David Foster Foundation. And that was pretty cool. I was hanging out with and rubbing elbows with Seal and other entertainers, and which was pretty neat. And I didn't think weddings were, again, I had that idea in my mind of what a wedding photographer was, and I didn't think weddings would be something that I would ever have a passion for or that I would want to get involved in. And but as sort of fortune would have it, I ended up shooting some weddings, second shooting starting out. And I was surprised at how much I really enjoyed it. Like Robert said, it's probably, of all the genres of photography, it's probably the one where you get to, you're covering everything. I mean, you're dealing with portraits, you're dealing with environment, you're dealing with landscape, you're dealing with fast-moving action, you're dealing with ever-changing situations and lighting conditions, and there's so much happening that it's, I think, probably one of the most challenging genres of photography that anybody could get into, but it can also be one of the most rewarding. I think just getting to see couples coming together on their wedding day, sharing their love with friends and family. It's a very emotional event, so there's a lot of emotion in a wedding. And just being there and having the privilege of being that person and a lot of times you're there with them probably more than anybody else on the day. In a lot of cases, I'm there with the bride or with the groom. I spend more time with them on the wedding day than they might even spend with each other. Or that they spend even with their closest friends and family. So I see it as a real honor and a real privilege to be invited into that. And I treat that with the utmost, care and respect. But like I say, I've only been at it now for about 8 years. When I first started out, our first couple of years in business, we really weren't focused necessarily on weddings, pardon the pun. And so, our first couple of years in business, we were only shooting a few weddings each year. But it gradually started to build. That's one of the, and it's one of the things I want to learn from you guys too. I'm excited to get your thoughts and hear your ideas about growing business and improving your business and booking more weddings. Because I think we're all in that same situation, right? Robert mentioned that he wouldn't want to get started in the business today. I don't know what your markets are like, but if it's anything like the market that I'm in, it's heavily oversaturated with everybody. Black Friday just came and went in the States, but also up here in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that will spawn a good 20, 30 new photographers by next week who got a good deal on a entry level SLR. But it's being able to separate yourself from the masses a little bit and continue to grow your business. And so I'm excited by that. So yeah, I've been shooting for about the last 8 years, primarily focused now on weddings, but I do also supplement the wedding season with portrait work and some commercial work as well. So that's my story in a nutshell.
So can I interject with just a thought? And it's kind of interesting hearing each of our paths, and then obviously having talked with the photographers that we have. The journey to being a photographer is really an interesting one, and there almost seems to be this pattern that repeats itself for obviously all for us, but then also I'm sure for the listener, in that a lot of the times photography comes as a bit of an accident, doesn't it? Where it's you maybe don't intentionally get into it for that reason. You kind of just, whether you pick up a camera and fall in love with it, or you're like me where you have an idea to run a business, and photography just happens to be the industry you go into. Maybe that would be a good kickoff point for us to kind of discuss and sort of say, what does that look like? You're getting started as a photographer. Maybe you're listening to this right now and you've got the bug, right? You love photography, or maybe you're like me where it's like you're an entrepreneur and you're like, yeah, I think photography would be a good industry for me to go into. What does that look like? Because there's so many paths that you can take. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen a lot of newer photographers make is that they kind of get into it and they kind of get overzealous about things, and they kind of just start running with it without really stopping and thinking about a plan, or saying, here's the path that I should go down, or here are some of the steps that I should do. It's kind of like baby steps, right? Like I forget if it was Robert or if it was Bruce that said the whole one step at a time. There's so many things that you could do, right? Like what have you guys found in your experience to be some good repeatable steps that a newer photographer can take getting into this industry?
Right. I think that's so important because, you have to learn as you go. And I know, in today's world with technology and everybody wanting stuff right now, I definitely see a big sense of entitlement. And I don't think it's just within the wedding industry. I think it's just within, sort of youth in general.
Right.
But, I see a lot of people within the wedding industry, they want to just, they start out, well, I want to charge, whatever their 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is.
Right.
And they want it to do that within a year. And, it takes, I cater to a high-end clientele, but it's taken me years to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And I think you do your client a disservice if you bite off more than you can chew in the beginning. I think that's, it's really important. If you're new, it's great, love the passion, love the eagerness, but don't do your clients a disservice. I think on the next show, we're going to talk about a list where this website put a blog that I read, like 50 things brides said their photographers could have done better. So we'll get into that later, but it's going to touch on that as well. And some of the things, like just reading through it, is like my thoughts were like, well, A, how much did the bride pay the photographer? But B, maybe lack of experience, so again, we're not putting you down. We want to help you get there and help you get those things and, be the best photographer, because we're going to make wedding photography. You can be proud to be a wedding photographer and go out there. And this is an industry that, is bigger than probably most other genres of photography. And I think that's my goal, is really to just, encourage you guys, inspire you guys. And I love, Bryan, that you're on the business side, because if I were to say that's the weakest part of my business, like most photographers, I think, I'm a good photographer, but I had to learn to be a business person.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point too, Robert, where it's, I think our industry is one of the most, and of course I'm a little biased because we're in the industry, but our industry is the most supportive industry that I think exists. I mean, there's so much available to newer photographers. And I think that's a really, really good point to drive home to the listener right now, where it's saying, listen, we're here to help you get going. Like there's no animosity. There's no, it's not us sitting here on a high hill saying like, don't do this, don't do that, like don't do this. It's kind of like, yeah, do it. Get in, try it. Here are some steps. Here are some things. Here are some lessons we've learned in the last, collectively between us 40 years or 45 years that we think you can learn from.
Right.
And so I think that there's a lot of that in our industry. I think that's a really good place to be. I've written a lot about this, but I think that right now is actually probably, as much as it's the most competitive time to be a photographer, I also think it's probably one of the most exciting times to be a photographer because of what's available to us, because of what things like social media and the internet and just all these things that we have available to us at our disposal. I think it's such a great time to be a photographer. What do you guys think?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the appeals, and that's why I think so many people are getting into photography today. Whether it's as just as a hobby or whether they're looking at pursuing it as as a profession, is that social media and the internet has changed how we're able to distribute and get our work seen in front of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people almost instantaneously. I mean, we've got tools today like Instagram and Facebook and all these other tools and Google Plus and all these other tools. We can get our work out there like never before. I mean, I'm sure maybe Robert, maybe more so than me and Bryan, can speak to back in more in the film days. If you shot a wedding, I mean, who else would see that wedding unless you put it up at a gallery showing or a print competition or something like that? How did you get your work seen back in those days so that you could get bookings and other people to hire you?
Well, if you think about it, I started shooting weddings before the internet.
Whoa.
BTI.
Wait, there was a time before the internet?
Yes, there was. So yeah, no, it was, I mean, I think then, just to kind of address that quickly, but it was more of a localized marketing. Like I marketed to florists and planners and people within my own city, and now I market globally. I go after planners and people everywhere. And of course, just with social media, people can see your images everywhere. But I've sort of opened up my market, like I don't just have to market in Los Angeles or, I'm gone after other cities that, I want to work in.
Mm-hmm. I think an interesting point about that is that, with the ability that we have with social media and the internet and everything, I think a lot of what photographers are able to do today in a way has become more crowded, and because there's more photographers in the space and there's more noise on like the social media channels and blogging and all these things, it's gotten very noisy. And I actually think we're going to start to see this throwback where those that are seeing greater success are those that are maybe going back to those methods and techniques and ideas that worked 15, 20 years ago. Because right now, if you play in this pool that's very busy, it's going to be hard to be noticed. Whereas if you step out of it and all of a sudden you're like going out for actual networking lunches, or you're doing something physical, you're bringing a wedding album to a planner and saying, hey, I know you have a Facebook page, I know that you have a website, but here's an album that you can show your brides some of my work. Go ahead and and you can use this. It shows off your work too. I think those photographers will see more success in the next few years than those that are just using the online versions of it. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think I'll say something real quick and then Bruce, you talk. But what you just touched on, Bryan, like business is about relationships and building those relationships and communicating to people one-on-one, dialogue, face-to-face, heart-to-heart. And if you get out there and you do that, you will grow your business quicker than anything else you can do by putting images on social media. Yes, there's those people that get lucky and throw something up, it goes viral, and they get their 10 seconds of fame. But building relationships one-on-one, face-to-face, like I personally, like I have a tag at the end of my email that says prefers one-on-one dialogue to emails and texts, because we're in a world that, I actually did a TED talk, not a big one. I did a local TEDx talk, and that's exactly what I talked about it. And the title of the talk was Communicating from the Heart. And, I told a little bit about myself personally in the beginning. You only have about 15 minutes. And then I turned it and I talked about how it's important for us as human beings to continue to communicate one-on-one, heart-to-heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole internet revolution and social media, it's kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. I think, on the curse side of things, I think, again, we're seeing a bit of the younger generation. There's a bit of this immediate gratification society, right, where they want everything and they want it today, just put it on credit, don't care, don't plan, just go in, jump in and do it. And I think we're seeing, a bit of that where, somebody gets a new camera and maybe they experience shallow depth of field for the first time, of a photograph of their cat, and they put it up on Facebook and 10 of their friends like it. And they feel like, oh my God, I'm the most amazing photographer now since sliced bread. I'm a wedding photographer now, the next day, right? All of a sudden, and they haven't thought about some of those things. So it can be a bit of and I can see it's very enticing. It's very, it's like, ooh, I can get going into this, and they're getting a lot of that positive feedback. But then at the same time, like you say, we've lost some of those personal touch, those relationship building things. And I agree with you, Bryan, that, doing that face to face and doing some of those things. A great tip somebody had given me once was that if you're applying for a new job, for example, rather than emailing in your resume or faxing in your resume, somebody suggested, go, either hand deliver it, or if you can't hand deliver it, send it via a courier. Like put it in a courier envelope, address it to the person, send it. They're going to get it on the other end. They're going to actually have to, physically sign for that thing. They're going to open it. It's going to have a bigger impact, and they're going to remember you more than the 200 email applications that they receive. So it's that same kind of principle, right? Is getting out there, doing the networking, socializing with people face to face, getting to know them. And that's one of the things that I've noticed in this, the last couple of years with our business is trying to do a better job of building up those relationships with the vendors, with the florists and the planners and the venues, because that's where we're seeing more of our bookings and referrals coming from, rather than just the cold call emails and email inquiries. And we can probably have a whole show dedicated to dealing with
to this,
email inquiries. But right. we'll get hundreds of email inquiries that we reply back to, and it's crickets. We never hear from them again. And people are just overwhelmed.
I think that's a great show. I wanted to do it. We're going to do a show on that. Like and I want this from the listeners. Like, what do you do to entice the people to write you back when you just get that email inquiry? Like, we all get them, and they fill out the form on your website. And so you guys start thinking about that. We'll do a future show on that, on just like the tricks to start the dialogue, to start the conversation.
I like that idea. Yes, definitely. We'll put that down for a future show topic. So
let me quickly, let's move on, but I'm going to put an exclamation point. I mean, you can say what you want, Bryan, but I saw him jump at the microphone. As far as like the fame goes, the 10 seconds of fame, Bruce said, you get 10 likes. I've done some of the biggest weddings in the world and some of the biggest celebrities in the world, and you get your 10, 15 seconds of fame. And I can sit here and say that my photographs have been on most covers of most magazines in the world and traveled around, but it doesn't change your life. It's definitely helped my business, but it doesn't mean that just because I've done those huge weddings that I have to continue to market and do those relationships. And, that world chose me. I did not choose it. And I actually, in a certain way, love to, I love the personal connection of my everyday couples. But they'll just show you. It's great to say that. It's great. I think photographers want their stuff published in magazines. It doesn't change. It doesn't change your life, for the long run.
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off of that point too, it's, the whole publishing thing, the 10 seconds of fame, that kind of thing will make you feel good in the moment, but be careful that you don't get hooked on that almost in the same sense that you would get hooked on a drug, because it's like it feels good and then all of a sudden it's over. And if you're constantly looking for that next thing, listen, it's good to be hungry. I'm not saying don't be hungry, don't look for it, don't look for improvement, but we also have to remember what we really and truly do in our business. And I think that the wedding industry specifically, and I could rant for a long time about this, so I won't, but the wedding industry in general, we spend so much time and energy trying to get those little quick fixes for ourselves. Those, we got published, or we got this, or we got on this list, or whatever. And a lot of the times I find that's at the expense of our bride and groom. And we have to remember that those are the people that are hiring us and trusting us and paying us to do what we do. And so I really think that if we can shift our focus in our business and in our creative abilities and in our focus to, be client-centered as opposed to necessarily like me-centered, us-centered.
Self-centered.
Yeah, self-centered. I think that's a really good place to be. And that's a really good mindset, I think, to adapt for any photographer, whether you're just getting started or whether you've been in it for a long time.
Right. We're there as a team, and we also have to get along with, 10 other vendors, whatever it is. And I think there's a lot of people that operate under the me, and especially photographers. You can even talk about photographers, videographers, and that whole thing. But the photographer thinks they're more important. And in today's world now, we have to share our time with the videographer. Where before they used to kind of just stand in the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it will have again. We're gonna have it. That's another topic that I think we could have.
Yeah.
You know, working with videographers, and I'd like to bring a videographer on and kind of have that conversation. I think that would be good. You know, to have that conversation as well. So let's maybe just sort of taking a little bit of a different course here. Is I want to talk to both of you guys a little bit about kind of what your philosophy on wedding photography, and maybe share kind of what's your typical approach to a wedding day, and what's your favorite part of the wedding day. Maybe Robert, let's start with you.
My favorite part of the wedding day, I think, I guess, is the thrill of the hunt. And what I mean by that is, capturing that moment. Now, I wouldn't call myself a photojournalist per se. I'm not just a photojournalist. I think, we wear a lot of different hats as far as that. But I love that moment. Like, what can I actually capture that day? And I think to be good at that, it's sort of having good anticipation, putting yourself in the right place where something may unfold. And again, we can talk about that in future shows. My philosophy to a successful wedding day, which we're going to talk a little bit about, I think, in the next episode, is really just education and planning, and really educating my brides on what I expect and what they expect of me. So it's a two-way street, listening to them. But I run out on a 3 hours timeline prior to my wedding. Most of my couples see each other before, so that I have what I call time to play on the wedding day, time to be creative, time to shoot what I want. I teach a whole, and again we'll get into that, I teach a whole thing on that and how to do it and get them to see each other for the first time, etc. But I say, to photographers, do you shoot what you want or do you shoot what you get? And I think a lot of photographers shoot what they get because they don't know how to make the timeline work in their favor. They don't know how to talk to the bride and couples in such a way that they get what they want. So for me, it's the success comes in the pre-planning, because I want time to play and I want time to be creative and I want time to do, yes, I have to shoot what they want, but I want to shoot what I want, because if we're only shooting for the couple, then photography is not going to be fun for you. So you got to mix it up a little bit. So that's kind of my approach to the wedding day. And I just go out there and have fun. I've shot probably over 1,000 weddings in my career, maybe more, I don't know. But I still love it. And you hear a lot of photographers talk about getting burned out and, but if they run up against those obstacles and things that burn them out, then they have to figure out how to change that and make it work for them and not just complain about it.
That could be a future topic as well, dealing with burnout.
I think after today's episode, we're going to have the next 75 episode show topics all lined up. It's going to be perfect.
Yeah. So Bryan, how about you? How do you approach a wedding day, and kind of what's your take on it, and what's your favorite part of the day?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I fundamentally believe that wedding photography is about people and relationships and the moment that those people share together. And I'm very, very adamant about that approach as a wedding photographer in everything that I do, because again, our industry has turned to this detail obsession. And don't get me wrong, listen, like the flowers, the decor, the ring, I mean, these things are all beautiful. They make up, they're like the what of, a wedding day. Like that's like sort of the little details I have a deeper belief that when everything is gone and the wedding day is over, and on your 5-year wedding anniversary, a couple will appreciate beautiful moments and genuine images of those that they love more than they will appreciate the way that their flowers looked. And so that's not to say that I don't photograph the flowers and the details and all that, because I do. I actually have my second shooter do that stuff as opposed to me, so I can have my sole focus on the people. And that's really my approach to wedding photography, because I have a big passion. I got married myself 5 years ago, and I know that when we look back at our photos, that's what I appreciate the most. The interesting part about that actually was my mindset changed a little bit after my wedding, because up until then I had always put a lot of emphasis on the portraits, the time during the day when we're actually with the bride and groom and the wedding party and all that. And I love that stuff. Like that's just, if I were to say what my favorite part of the day is, like, creatively, I love that stuff. I love creating the warmth and just being able to create a vision for the couple and sort of show them what they're feeling, and through imagery. And so I love that. But after my wedding 5 years ago, when we look back at the images from that wedding and in our wedding album, because we did get a wedding album made from our photographer, Yeah, yeah, which most photographers don't do. I wanted to see what it was like to be a client, and that was pretty important for me. So, the images that I appreciate and that we love the most are those moments in the morning when we were getting ready, when the photographer was kind of hanging around and capturing things as they happen, and then during the reception, like during the dancing, during the cocktails, during the speeches. I have a picture of like my Nona crying during one of the speeches, and it's like I actually never saw that during the speeches because we had 200 people at our wedding. But looking back at those images, those are the ones that mean the most to me. And I love the portraits of us at the park in between. They're great, they're beautiful, I love them. But the ones that really impact me the most and bring me back to that day are those more photojournalistic moments that were happening when I wasn't aware of the photographer. And so my perspective has shifted a bit. I'm not going to say I'm like a purist photojournalist because that's not the case. I'm not an introvert in the sense that I wanted to sit back. I actually like being able to affect and control and help and influence what's happening because I think that we have a lot of flexibility in that and how we can be capturing and telling a story in a wedding day and how we are as a wedding photographer. But I would say that for me, that's the stuff that I appreciate the most. At the same time, I still love the portrait side. I still love being able to be creative and have fun and basically, I mean, how many couples, I'm sure you guys can relate to this. I'm sure every listener can relate to this. I have every single couple comes into my studio that meets with me and says, listen, I don't want to be posed, and it's like, that's because our generation has this negative connotation with what it means to be posed. We associate it with the high school, bookshelf backdrop with like our hands under our chin, and like that's what we feel posing is. And I love being able to show couples, hey, listen, it's okay to have some direction. I will make you look your best and you will still feel comfortable in that position in that moment. And so I think that's a lot of fun.
I think when people say I don't want to be posed, what they're saying is I don't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah,
but if you can make them comfortable,
exactly,
then they're going to like their posed pictures.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, like, to those listening, that idea in and of itself, if you can really master that, that will get you more business than I would bet anything else that you could do. Because of all things that a couple would talk about, they will always remember how you made them feel on their wedding day. Right. And you can get the technically most perfect photograph in the world, but if they're uncomfortable and feeling unnatural in that moment, every time they show somebody that picture, they're going to say, yeah, this is beautiful. This is drop dead gorgeous. This won this photographer awards. But I kind of felt really awkward in that moment. Right. That's what any other person is going to remember about you. Whereas if you can capture a great image, but also make them feel comfortable and relax and enjoy the moment, they'll talk about that more than anything.
Right. I think wedding photographer, like they say in real estate, location, location, location. Not just wedding photographer, but as a good photographer, personality, personality.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
And real, honest, genuine, not fake.
Yeah.
Be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else, and they will love you.
That's totally it. I've seen so many photographers, well, not even photographers, but other vendors that will, you can tell that they're kind of putting on an act sometimes. And the challenge with that, as Bruce said earlier, we're with this couple for how many hours on a day? 12 hours. Plus we're dealing with them countless hours before, after, and everything else that goes on. And then all that gets passed on through referrals. We have to maintain that same kind of persona online, in our emails, everything. And if you're not being genuine to who you are, that's going to come across really quickly. And you're going to always be trying to backpedal to try and be somebody that you're not. So definitely I agree with Robert. You have to be the best version of yourself. And so with that, Bruce, what about you?
Me? Well, yeah, that's something that we talk to our couples when they come in to meet with us, for the first time. And we say, regardless of whether you guys decide to go with us or go with somebody else, I shoot with my wife, so she's my second shooter. We always tell them, regardless of who you go with at the end of the day, you be comfortable. Make sure you're comfortable with that photographer or photographers, because nothing will affect your wedding photos more than your relationship with your photographer, I think. They always say the camera looks both ways. That's it's a big part of it, right? If your clients aren't going to be comfortable with you, then it's going to come through in the photos. So I think that's an important thing that we try to convey to our clients. We say, look, if you love us, great, and you want to work with us, fantastic. If you don't feel comfortable with us and we don't feel like we're the right fit, don't feel bad. We want find somebody that is going to be a good fit with you, because we know we're not maybe the right fit for every couple that comes through our door, right? And vice versa. So I think that's a big part of it. And that's the kind of the approach that we take with our clients. And we'll have another thing we can talk about is, engagement sessions. We do that with all of our couples to get them comfortable with us before the wedding day as well. But my favorite part of the day is probably the morning, kind of the getting ready stuff. Oftentimes I'll go with the girls and my wife will go with the guys, just because I find what's happening with the girls tends to be a bit more interesting than what's happening with the guys usually.
Absolutely.
And it's just, I find at those times, everybody's guard is down a little bit. They're caught up in what they have to get done. And it allows me to kind of capture, be in the hunt, as Robert said, right? Looking for those moments. And then I really like when our couples do a first look. I know not every couple is into it, and sometimes timelines of the day and the way they have things scheduled kind of don't allow us to do that all the time. But I really love that moment when, the groom gets to see his bride for the first time. The bride sees, her groom for the first time with nobody else around except us. And again, that's that privileged moment that nobody else gets to see besides us. But I find that's when people you see real emotion and real moments. Speeches are another time where there's nothing beats a good tearjerker speech.
Okay, honestly, who's cried during a toast before?
Oh yeah.
Yep, right here.
Sitting in the corner of the room, just tears running down my eyes.
And I know Robert and I you and I had this conversation last week when we were doing some planning for the show. But I think you and I both love to look for grandparents. I unfortunately lost both my grandfathers were passed away before I was born, so I never got to know them or meet them. And both my grandmothers passed away when I was still fairly young. So I only got to spend short periods of time with them, and that's one of the things that I wish I could have gotten to know my grandparents better and spent more time with my grandparents. And so I know how important grandparents are to people, and parents, and any family member. So I'm always looking for those opportunities, not just to catch a formal moment with them, but also those candid moments, because those are often the times. We had a bride this year that came in. It was only about 3 weeks after her wedding. She came in to see their images, and one of the photos was of her groom, and it was with her grandmother, or his grandmother rather. And we found out that the grandmother had passed away 2 weeks after the wedding. So we probably took the last photograph of her, most likely, or the last kind of official photograph of her and him together. And that was really those are the moments where you kind of go, wow, this is why I do what I do.
Right.
And it's those are tough moments, right? Sometimes those things, or the worst is when we have maybe a parent has recently passed just before the wedding, and they're going to talk about them at the wedding or at the reception, or there's sometimes they maybe have a seat for that person at the wedding with a photograph. Those are some pretty heavy emotional times, and they're difficult to photograph because I tend to be, I wear my emotions a little bit on my sleeve, and I can get caught up in those moments and find myself like I gotta clean myself up here and pull it together. Together, Clark. Let's do this. Yeah. But those moments for me really those push me on the wedding day, right? I love those moments, and being able to capture those moments and then have the bride and groom go, oh, I'm so glad you caught, that moment with me and my grandmother, or you caught that moment, or you caught that piece of the locket that I had in my bouquet. That was my grandmother's. Those kind of, when you hear those things, right? It's kind of that makes it all worthwhile. Right?
I mean, think of the significance of what we do. Going back to what you said, Bryan, about we're there for the bride and groom and not for ourselves. And even if you've sort of not been treated the greatest, because not every couple is amazing, we've all had those experiences. But I mean, if you think about it, like the significance why, as a historian, and what you're doing and what those images are going to mean to those people and their kids and their grandkids and future generations, we really have a very important role. I mean, it takes photography even that much more, to the wedding photography, to the top.
Absolutely.
I think just as a quick, I guess, side tangent, but also in giving something really, really kind of concrete too for the listener. This came to me, and it's something I always do, but I thought this is very relevant to what we're talking about right now. For those photographers that are listening right now that are, let's say you're at a wedding and you're photographing the formal portrait time, right? And you're doing a portrait with bride and groom and grandma, or groom with his grandma, or whatever, right? I mean, these moments are great. These portraits are great. They're they're documentary. It's like, this is who was at the wedding, you know, the formal portraits. But here's something that I would encourage you to really consider. Take that formal portrait, and most photographers at that point, they pull the camera down, they look at their list, and they move on to the next one. Don't pull the camera down. Finish with the portrait. Say to the groom and to his grandma or whoever's in front of the camera, and this could be applied to anyone in the family, and say, okay, we got it, but keep your eye on that grouping, on that, you know, groom with his grandma, because like any grandma at that point is then going to reach up to the groom, probably grab onto his cheek or grab onto the back of his head, give him this big kiss. They're going to have this like really, really genuine moment. And that is what we need to be capturing. So yes, we need to get that formal portrait of them smiling, looking at the camera, cheese. But then let's not put the camera down and really be sensitive to, it's the genuine moments that happen before and after that formal portrait that are really meaningful.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, I had a chance recently to meet up with Erica and Lanny Mann from Two Man Studios. They're a couple of photographers here in Alberta that they're quite, you know, their stuff is pretty remarkable. But they were doing a speaking engagement for, I believe it was the Fearless photographers, and I think the title of their talk was "Shoot the Bleep Out of It," and that was one of their things where they said, you know, just go in there and shoot the crap out of it, because if it's that moment when you put your camera down and relax your guard, that moment happens. And they said, you know, your odds of getting that 1 in a million shot go up. It's like buying a ticket to the lottery. You know, if you only buy one ticket in the lottery, your odds, you know, of winning the lottery are pretty slim. Now, if you buy, you know, 10,000 tickets to the lottery, you're probably still not going to win the lottery, but your odds are going to go up, right? And that was kind of their idea. And I'd love to have them on the show and talk about that in a future episode if we can get them on. I think that would be great. But that was, you know, waiting, you know, having that camera at the ready and being, you know, anticipating. You know, I think Robert talked about anticipation, right? Yeah. And waiting for those moments. But that's a great tip, Brian. Yeah, is you know, get the formal portrait, but then don't stop shooting. Shoot through it. Yeah. Right? Shoot through the moment. You know, because that's, like you say, when those genuine, heart-touching, you know, kind of heartfelt moments happen. Absolutely.
And if it's not you, educate your second shooter on that. Like, be ready for this. You know, when I pull the camera down or if I miss it, like, I want you watching, you know, those moments right before and right after, you know, I'm taking the picture. Or what I do is I actually have my second shooter shoot the formals, and I direct with my camera in my hand so that I'm watching for that stuff. But I'm directing, they're just pushing the button. Another topic, but
cool.
You know, like, however you do it, you know, just educate that other person too, that that's what you want, you know?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, one last kind of thing I wanted to sort of just a bit of a wrap, maybe more on the technical side, is let's talk just a little bit about what everybody shoots with. I know people are going to ask us, you know, not that what you shoot with matters, but I think just in terms of when we get talking, because we're going to have some segments where we're going to talk a little bit about gear and about equipment and things like that. So maybe just talk a little bit about, you know, on the technical side, what you like to shoot with, you know, maybe your favorite piece of gear. If you were stuck on a desert island and only could have one lens, what would you choose? That kind of thing. Hey, Brian, you start.
Cool. So, I've been a Nikon shooter for the last 7 years, and currently I've got the Nikon D4S, and I've got, you know, the 70-200, the 24, like all the lenses. But my priorities in that have shifted in the past year and a half. I'm actually a Fuji X photographer now. And by X photographer, that doesn't mean that like I was a photographer and like X, it's like X, it's a bad name anyway.
Not an X Fuji, but a Fuji X.
Yeah. So I'm sponsored by Fuji, I guess is the best way to put it. And I've been shooting about 65% of my work now with my Fuji gear. And it's completely opened up a whole new way of shooting, a whole new style. I know, Robert, I'm sure you'll talk about, you know, yourself with your mirrorless cameras, but this whole new world that we're in with mirrorless cameras, and specifically for me, my Fuji cameras have been a total source of inspiration for me and how I shoot, why I shoot. You know, my back appreciates the fact that I'm not carrying around these giant cameras, but that's where I've been spending a lot of time recently. For portraits, I'll usually just bring my Fuji stuff out. I don't even need to bring my Nikon with me. You know, obviously for some of the faster moving stuff during a wedding day, I'll want my Nikon for the focus, but that's pretty much it. I've got the Fuji X-T1 if you want specifics. I've got the Fuji X100T. The primes on the Fujis are just unbelievable. So I've got the 56 1.2 prime, the 23 1.4 prime, and that's it. I do a lot of off-camera flash work. And so I've got these little Cactus V6 triggers that I use, and that way I can basically just take the trigger and put it onto my my Nikon, or I can put it onto my Fuji, and it's going to work all just the same. So I've got all SB900s that I use for my flashes, and that's pretty much it, sort of in a nutshell. I guess I know it's really techy, but that's what I use. I'm an Apple guy, so all my computers and everything is Apple. I've got every product that they've ever made, I think ever since 1995 or something like that. So
you have the original?
I don't know. The original. Yeah, no, I don't have that one. It's maybe not that long, but that's that's me in a nutshell.
Shrine
yeah, a museum. That's me in a nutshell. That's what I use. That's how I shoot.
Robert, how about you?
I'm a Sony shooter. I'm a Sony artisan. I've been shooting Sony for about 2.5 years now. Formerly shot Canon, so I switched over, and absolutely love like the technology and like what Sony's done, and I know Sony's getting a lot of buzz, and as they should. But I have a myriad of different Sony bodies. I started shooting the A77. I don't have any more. A99 was a lot of my wedding works, and then like Bryan said, I've kind of gone to mirrorless. So I'm shooting a lot of my A7s. I have an A7, A7S, A7R. Typically at the weddings now, I'm using the S for the low light in that. As well as that shoots 4K, but I'm not utilizing that, of course, at my weddings. And one of my favorite cameras, actually, I have it sitting on my desk, is the A6000. I mean, look how little this is. Like Bryan talked about light, saving his back. It's just, and it's amazingly fast. He said he still breaks out his Nikon. That camera shoots 11 frames a second. And with a 7200 G series lens on that, it's just, I shoot sports with it. I shoot my kids' games with it. I shoot candids at weddings with it. One of the things I like to do is like walk around the cocktail hour and like hunt, as I said, and like single out guests and shoot candid headshots of different guests and, get them smiling. But for sports, I actually just took that to a football game this weekend. I got a pass to an NFL game, and I was on the field and I shot with just that camera, and you should have seen the looks that I was getting from the other photographers. But then they got brave and started asking me like, what camera is that? And then I started showing them, because I can Wi-Fi right from the camera to my iPhone.
Yeah, right.
And I was showing them images that I got. And so they were like, I put one on Instagram, so if anybody wants to go to my Instagram, we'll give all that out. But, and like, they were like, wow, like, I think they were kind of doubly impressed that I could just send the image right from my, camera to my iPhone on the spot. But it's just an amazing, and I'm shooting a ton of that at my weddings. Like, people think like, well, I think biggest question people ask, like, well, don't you worry about what your couple thinks? A lot of people will come up and ask me about that camera, because it's smaller and different, but like Bryan said, he's just amazed by his cameras, and it's amazing. And, they have to, I'm there, they're trusting me. But, I mean, just some of the technology that Sony has, I mean, the OLED viewfinder, where you can actually adjust your exposure right in the viewfinder and not pull the camera away from your eye. You don't have to chimp and look at the back of your camera. You can just shoot, adjust. I mean, there's so many. Again, whole show. But
yeah.
Loving my Sony stuff.
Nice.
What about you, Bruce?
Well, I'm old school. I'm still kicking it in the Canon camp. I'm still lugging around 4,000.
It's good that we have 3 different brands, though.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we cover it all. So yeah, I'm kicking it old school. I shoot mainly with a Canon the 1DX, and then a 5D Mark III as my second body primarily. And the range of lenses and from primes to zooms, kind of cover it all. Like Bryan, I like to do a lot of off-camera flash. So I originally was using mainly the Canon flashes, but recently in the last couple of years, I've actually switched over, and I'm using these bare bulb flashes from Godox, or Cheetah also makes them, a few different ones, and I found they're very similar to the Quantum lights, and I find they're excellent lights, very affordable and just super fast recycling times, and so we bring those with us everywhere we go. So that's my story. I haven't gone the mirrorless route yet. I think it's probably something that I'll take a look at in the next couple of years. I'm really intrigued by what Sony's doing.
Couple of years, you need to jump on that.
I know. It's
it's okay, Robert. If he keeps hanging out with us, we'll get him switched over eventually.
You get me there.
He'll be switched to mirrorless in the next 3 episodes.
Probably, yeah. You guys will make me go out and spend money.
Hey, that Sony A6000 is only $650.
I know, but they just announced that new A7 II. with the
But that's it's and then the A6000 is not mirrorless, but it's translucent mirror. But I mean, still I love that little camera. Yeah.
So
well, that's technology. There's always going to be a new camera, just like computers.
Like, oh yeah, you can never keep up with it. I mean, I had the Fuji X100, and I love that little camera. It was a great little camera, but I was finding that like I bought it thinking I would take it on trips, and it would be kind of my pack around camera. Yeah. And I found 9 times out of 10 I was bringing my iPhone and using that for any of those kind of shots, and it just wasn't getting the love that I felt it should get. So I ended up leaving it.
I kind of was the same way, but with the A6000 or any camera that does that, because it Wi-Fi's right to your phone, I'd so much rather like take a nice quality image and then send it to my phone. And I put stuff on Instagram and people will say, "You got that with your iPhone?" I'm all, yeah.
Well, then I went out and got the 6 Plus, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I don't know. So I'm kind of I'm on the fence. But I think eventually, I will see it, and I'm starting to see that movement with other photographers too. Making a bit of that leap into the mirrorless world. And again, we could probably have a whole show just talking about this for sure. But so that's kind of where that's where I am. I also do teach as well. So I teach a lot on off-camera flash and studio lighting and stuff like that, because I find that's an area where a lot of photographers struggle. It tends to be a bit more technical. Maybe it's a guy thing. We tend to be more into the gear and the techie side of it. So I like that stuff. I like getting into the mechanics of the flash and teaching that. So I teach a lot of that and really enjoy that. We don't use it in all of our work. I'd say probably it's about 20% of our work is off-camera flash, but definitely having that tool in our tool belt I think helps us separate us a little bit from other photographers that maybe are, just quote unquote natural light photographers. Right. So cool. Well, guys, I think we've done a pretty good job of introducing ourselves to our audience. How do you guys feel?
Well, they always have the questions. Yeah. They can email us.
And they'll probably get sick of us, I'm sure, eventually. So they'll learn more about us and all this kind of stuff in future episodes, I'm sure. But I think what we wanted to do in this episode was really just kind of establish like who are we and what's this show going to be about. I think upcoming episodes. I mean, we kind of mentioned even already some potential topics that we could talk about. We've talked about marketing. We've talked about communicating with the bride and groom to develop a timeline for the day. We've talked about some gear stuff. We've covered a whole bunch of topics today. Obviously just, really skimming the surface. But I think those will make great discussion topics for future episodes. Mm-hmm. One of the things we want to have as a feature we want to have is a listener question segment. So we want to definitely get your feedback and get your questions and see if we can answer them, or maybe if we can't answer them, we can bring in somebody that can answer a question for you. It can be about anything. It can be gear related. It could be about business. It could be about marketing. It could be about relationship building. It could be about how to work with your clients to get better expression out of them, better emotion, posing, those all kinds of topics. The sky's the limit in terms of what you can ask us. So if you want to ask us a question, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can send us an email, twipwed@thisweekinphoto.com, and we'll get those emails. You can also go over onto the thisweekinphoto.com website, and there's a place on there where you can ask a listener question and leave an audio question. We'll also keep an eye out on Twitter. If you use the hashtag TWiPWed, you can ask questions through Twitter, or you can also use the comment section. So for each episode that we do, there'll be a blog post that'll accompany it. We'll have links in there to the show notes, anything that we talk about. If there's links to things, be it articles that we talk about or blog posts or gear or whatever, we'll have that in the show notes. You can go to this episode, blog post for this episode, leave comments in there, and we'll definitely take those as well and look for your questions and your comments and your feedback.
And so there's no confusion. Just let them know we do not have a Twitter account for the show. So just tweet with your own account and use that hashtag. And we can do that, as well as I think we're going to have an Instagram account. We've kind of talked about that. So look for that in the future. And that was all my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's good. So maybe just to kind of we'll wrap things up there. And where can people find everybody? Robert, where can everybody find you? Where's the best? Where do you hang out these days?
Well, I like to hang out at home with my kids when I'm not traveling. But if you want to see my website, of course, it's robertevans.com. Twitter, I'm at Robert Evans. Instagram is at Robert Evans. And then Google Plus is... I guess it's plus Robert Evans 101.
Excellent. And Bryan, where can folks find you?
So if you're interested in checking out any of my photography, my website is www.bcapphoto.com. That's BCAP photo with 2 P's. I always have to make that clarification because I don't have the other domain registered, and so you'll go to some other website if you go there. If you want to find me on Facebook or on Twitter, it's bcapphoto, so at bcapphoto on Twitter, or facebook.com/bcapphoto on Facebook. And if you want to find any of the educational stuff that I do for photographers, where I teach and talk all about the business of photography, that's at sproutingphotographer.com. Or because you're listening to a podcast, and if you like podcasts, which we hope you do because you just listened to the last 45 minutes of us talk, I also have a podcast as well if you're interested in diving more into the business side of photography, and that's just at Sprouting Photographer in iTunes.
Awesome.
And that's it.
Yeah, I love that show. I listen to it all the time and go to your site for resources. It's great. So
thank you.
Excellent. And if you want to keep up with me, you can find me at a few different places. My website is momentsindigital.com. On Twitter, I'm Bruce Clarke, and that's Clarke with an E, so Clarke. Same thing, Google+, just search for Bruce Clarke. You'll find me on there. And on Facebook, the business is at Moments in Digital Photography. Facebook.com/Moments in Digital Photography. And again, we'll have links to all these things, over on the blog post. So if you're not sure, just head on over to thisweekinphoto.com and look for the TWiP Pro Weddings show and check out the show notes for this episode. So with that, until next time, I guess, don't trip and fall into the baptismal pool. I don't know. I tried to come up with something clever. Frederick's got, take the lens cap off. I don't know. It's subject to change.
We have to work on that.
We might have to work on that one, yeah. So, in any event, until the next episode, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you on the next show.
Bye.
See ya.